Daniel lived a quiet life. Too quiet, some would say. His small apartment on the edge of the city was neat, clean, and silent. Every morning he went to work, every evening he came back, and every night he ate alone. His meals were simple. Sometimes just bread, sometimes a bowl of noodles. He didn't have the energy to cook much. After eating, he would sit near the window, stare at the street below, and wonder if this was all his life would ever be. The truth was, Daniel was lonely. He had friends once, but distance and time had slowly pulled them apart. He had family, but they lived far away, and he spoke to them only on the phone now and then. His days felt like a cycle he couldn't escape, and even though he tried not to think about it, the emptiness of his apartment was a weight on his chest. Then one afternoon, everything changed. He heard noise outside his door. Footsteps, boxes moving, and a voice speaking softly, a voice unlike anything he had heard before. Curious, Daniel peeked through the small opening in his door. A tall woman stood in the hallway, carrying a box that seemed far too heavy for her. She looked different, though he couldn't say how. Her skin seemed smoother, her movements almost too graceful, and when she turned slightly, Daniel thought he saw a strange glow in her eyes. He froze, unsure if he should help. Finally, he opened his door. "Need a hand with that?" he asked. The woman turned to him, startled at first. Then she smiled. The smile was warm, bright, and almost calming. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice melodic, almost like a song. Daniel quickly grabbed the box from her arms. It was lighter than it looked, but he didn't say anything. Together, they placed it inside the apartment next door to his. "I just moved in," she said, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "My name is Lyra." "Daniel," he replied, trying not to stare at her unusual eyes. They seemed to shift color in the light, from soft silver to pale blue. But he forced himself to act normal. She was just his new neighbor, nothing more. Still, when he went back to his apartment, he couldn't shake the strange feeling she left behind. That evening, Daniel was heating instant noodles on the stove when he heard a gentle knock on his door. Surprised, he opened it. There stood Lyra, holding a tray covered with steam. "I made too much food," she said, almost shyly. "Would you like some?" Daniel blinked. No neighbor had ever done that before. "Oh, sure. Thank you." She handed him the tray, and the smell that rose from it made his stomach growl instantly. The food looked strange. Colors richer than anything he had ever seen, glowing faintly under the kitchen light. But when he took a bite, his eyes widened. It was delicious. More than delicious. The flavor filled his mouth in a way he had never known before. Sweet, sharp, warm, and comforting all at once. It felt like more than food. It felt like a memory, like coming home after a long absence. When he looked back up at her, she was watching him carefully, as if waiting for his reaction. Daniel struggled to find words. "This is amazing." Lyra's smile deepened, and for a moment, Daniel thought he saw relief in her glowing eyes. "I'm glad you like it," she said. "I will bring you more tomorrow." And just like that, she left, closing the door softly behind her. Daniel stood there, holding the tray in his hands, confused but strangely happy. For the first time in years, someone had cared enough to cook for him. For the first time in years, his apartment didn't feel so empty. He didn't know who Lyra really was, or why her eyes seemed to shine, or why her food tasted like magic. But deep inside, Daniel felt something he had forgotten long ago. The next evening, Daniel returned home from work, tired as always. His shoulders ached from hours at the office, and his head buzzed with numbers and deadlines. Usually, he would collapse on the couch, heat something quick, and eat in silence. But that night, as he unlocked his door, he noticed the faint smell of something sweet drifting through the hallway. Before he could step inside, there was a gentle knock. He opened the door, and there she was again, Lyra. She carried another tray, steam curling in the air, her glowing eyes soft with kindness. "I cooked again," she said, her voice calm and soothing. "I thought you might like to join me this time." Daniel hesitated. It had been years since anyone invited him to share a meal. But something about Lyra's smile melted his hesitation. "I'd like that," he said quietly. They sat in her apartment that night, and Daniel realized how different it was from his own. While his walls were bare, hers were covered with strange cloths that shimmered like starlight. Small objects, stones, crystals, and tools he couldn't name, were placed carefully around the room, glowing faintly as though alive. On the table before them, she placed bowls filled with colors Daniel had never seen in food before. One dish shimmered like liquid gold. Another was deep purple with a fragrance that made his mouth water. He took a bite, and his whole body seemed to wake up. Flavors danced on his tongue. Sweetness that turned into warmth, warmth that faded into cool relief. It was unlike anything from Earth, yet it felt so comforting. Daniel paused, closing his eyes. "This is incredible. I've never tasted anything like this." Lyra's eyes brightened, almost glowing. "It is a dish from my home," she whispered. "It means comfort after storms. My people make it when they want to show care." Daniel's heart tightened. No one had cooked for him with such meaning before. For so long, his meals had been just survival, something to fill his stomach, nothing more. But here, with her, food felt like love. Night after night, the ritual continued. Daniel would hear her knock, and she would stand there with a tray or an invitation. Sometimes they ate in his apartment, sometimes in hers, but the pattern never broke. Each meal was different. One evening, she served a glowing soup that felt warm even in his chest after swallowing. Another time, she gave him bread that was soft as clouds, with a sweetness that reminded him of childhood. Once, she brought a dish that sparkled faintly blue, and when Daniel bit into it, he swore it lifted his sadness, just for a moment. With every meal, they spoke more. Daniel told her about his childhood, about how he once dreamed of traveling the world but never had the chance. He told her about his parents, about how far they lived, and about how silence filled his apartment most nights. Lyra listened intently, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. She spoke little of herself, but sometimes her words slipped through. She mentioned seas that shone like glass, forests that hummed with light, and skies where stars hung so close they looked like lanterns. At first, Daniel thought she spoke in metaphors, but then he remembered her eyes, her strange belongings, and the food that tasted like no recipe on earth. Slowly, a quiet realization grew inside him. She was not like anyone else. She was not even from this world. Yet he wasn't afraid. If anything, he felt drawn closer. One evening, as he ate a dish that glowed faintly pink, he found himself laughing for the first time in months. Not the polite laugh he used at work, but a real laugh, loud and unguarded. Lyra's face softened, and she laughed too, her voice like music echoing through the room. That night, when he returned to his own apartment, Daniel paused before shutting the door. He looked back at the space where she had stood just moments ago, smiling at him. For the first time in years, his apartment didn't feel so empty. The silence no longer weighed on him, because now there was someone next door who cared, and every knock on the door reminded him that life, somehow, was becoming brighter again. Weeks passed, and Daniel's life changed in ways he could hardly believe. The tired, lonely evenings he once dreaded were now filled with laughter, stories, and the warmth of food that felt almost magical. Every day, when he left work, he found himself walking faster, eager for the soft knock that would come at his door. But curiosity also grew inside him. The food, the shimmering colors, the way it touched his emotions. None of it was normal, And Lyra herself, with her glowing eyes and graceful movements, carried mysteries he could no longer ignore. One evening, as they sat across the table, Daniel finally asked the question that had been pressing in his heart. "Lyra," he said gently, setting down his fork, "where did you learn to cook like this? I've never tasted anything like it before." For a long moment, she was silent. Her glowing eyes dimmed, and her hands tightened around the bowl she was holding. Daniel felt a sting of regret. Maybe he shouldn't have asked. But then she let out a soft breath and looked at him. "It is from my home," she whispered. "But my home is not here." Daniel frowned. "Not here? You mean another country?" Lyra shook her head slowly. Her voice trembled, but her eyes held his. "No, Daniel. Another world." The room fell silent. Daniel's heart thumped hard against his chest. The thought seemed impossible, absurd, like something from the science fiction books he used to read as a child. But as he stared at her, her glowing eyes, the strange shimmer in her hair, the way her food felt alive, he realized it wasn't a joke. "You're saying," his voice caught, "you're an alien?" Her gaze lowered, almost as if she were ashamed. "Yes, I did not want to frighten you. I tried to live quietly, to cause no harm. Cooking is the only way I know how to connect. It is sacred for my people." Daniel sat frozen. The fork in his hand slipped and clinked softly against the plate. For a moment, a storm of emotions rushed through him. Shock, confusion, even a flicker of fear. But above all, he saw the look on her face. She was scared, not of him, but of losing him. And in that moment, his choice was clear. Daniel leaned back slowly, then smiled, though his chest still pounded. "Alien or not, this is still the best food I've ever had." Lyra's eyes widened. For a second, she seemed stunned, as if she had prepared herself for rejection but not acceptance. Then her lips curved into the softest, most relieved smile he had ever seen. "You are not afraid," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Why would I be? You've shown me nothing but kindness. Honestly, you've made my life better than I thought it could be. I don't care where you're from, Lyra. I care that you're here." Tears shimmered faintly in her glowing eyes. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and placed it over his. Her skin was warm, almost too warm, but Daniel didn't pull away. For a long time, they sat in silence, their hands joined, the glow of her strange food lighting the room. After that night, their bond grew deeper. Lyra spoke more about her world. She told him about seas that glowed under 3 moons, about forests where every leaf could sing, and about her people who believed meals were more than survival. They were promises. To cook for someone was to give a part of your soul. Daniel listened with awe, every word painting a picture he could hardly imagine. Yet, even though her stories spoke of wonders beyond earth, he noticed something else in her voice, a quiet sorrow. She never explained why she had left her world, never said why she lived here, alone. But Daniel didn't push. Instead, he gave her what she had given him: companionship without questions, comfort without demands. And every evening, as they shared meals that shimmered with otherworldly light, Daniel realized something powerful. It wasn't just the food that changed him. It was her. An alien or not, Lyra had brought color back into a life he thought would always remain gray. Life for Daniel had changed completely. What was once an endless circle of work, silence, and lonely meals had transformed into something warm and alive. Every evening, he now looked forward to the gentle knock on his door, or the sound of Lyra's soft voice calling his name. It wasn't just the food anymore. It was her. Yes, the dishes she made still amazed him, each one filled with colors and flavors that touched his emotions in ways he didn't understand. Some meals brought him peace, others gave him energy, and sometimes the taste reminded him of childhood memories he thought he had lost forever. But what mattered most was that she chose to share it with him. One evening, as they sat together in her apartment, Daniel noticed the way her glowing eyes watched him when he laughed. He realized how much lighter his heart had become. It had been years since anyone cared if he smiled. Years since he felt truly seen. "You know," Daniel said, smiling shyly as he wiped the corner of his mouth, "I'm starting to believe your food has magic in it." Lyra tilted her head, her silver blue eyes glowing softly. "In a way it does. For my people, food carries more than flavor. It carries intention. When I cook, I put part of myself into it. That is why it comforts you." Daniel looked down at the bowl in his hands, feeling a strange warmth spread through him. He realized then that every bite he had taken wasn't just cooking, it was care. It was her soul, reaching out to him. "Then I've been eating little pieces of your heart all this time," he said softly. Lyra laughed, the sound like music. "Perhaps," she whispered. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Daniel began to share more about his own world, his struggles, his dreams. He told her about the long nights when silence nearly broke him, and how her presence had lifted that weight without him even realizing it. She listened with a tenderness that made him feel safe, as if his words were treasures she carefully stored away. Sometimes they walked together in the city. Daniel noticed how people often stared at her, though they didn't understand why. To others, she probably just looked unusual, beautiful in a way they couldn't name. But Daniel knew the truth. She carried starlight in her eyes. Other times, they stayed in and cooked together. Daniel wasn't much of a cook, but Lyra patiently guided him. She showed him how to stir her glowing ingredients, how to cut strange fruits that seemed to sing faintly when sliced, how to balance flavors that danced across the tongue. He made mistakes, of course, but she never laughed at him. Instead, she smiled, as if every effort was precious. For Daniel, those small moments, her hand guiding his, her gentle laugh when he burned something, felt more magical than even the food itself. Yet, beneath all the joy, there was something else in Lyra's eyes. A hidden sadness. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't watching, her smile would fade, and her gaze would drift far away, as if searching the stars she had once called home. Daniel wanted to ask why she had come here, why she was alone on a world not her own. But he didn't. He respected the silence she kept. Instead, he gave her the only thing he could, his presence, his listening, his quiet acceptance. One evening, as they finished another meal, Lyra leaned back and whispered, "Daniel, do you know what it means for my people to cook for someone every day?" He shook his head. "No, but I feel it's important." Her eyes softened, glowing like moonlight. "It is more than kindness. It is a bond, a way of saying, you are not alone. You belong with me." Daniel's heart thudded in his chest. He didn't know what to say. He only nodded, trying to keep his emotions steady, because deep inside he knew he did belong with her. As the night grew quiet, Daniel realized something simple but powerful. The food had brought them together. But it was not food that kept him coming back. It was Lyra. It was the bond they were building. One meal, one smile, one heartbeat at a time. The days turned into weeks, and the bond between Daniel and Lyra grew deeper than either of them had expected. What began as shared meals had become something far greater. Daniel no longer felt the heavy silence of his apartment, because his evenings were filled with light, laughter, and the warmth of someone who truly cared. But then one evening, everything changed. Daniel returned home from work, tired as always, but instead of waiting for the familiar knock, he found Lyra standing outside his door already. She held something in her hands, a small silver vessel that glowed faintly, as though it carried a piece of the stars inside it. Her face was calm, but Daniel noticed the slight tremble in her fingers, the way her glowing eyes seemed brighter than usual. "Daniel," she said softly, "may I come in?" "Of course," he answered, though his heart already beat faster than usual. Inside his apartment, she placed the vessel carefully on the table. She did not bring other dishes, no trays or bowls of glowing food like she usually did. Just that single vessel. Daniel frowned, sitting down across from her. "What is this?" he asked gently. Lyra's hands folded in her lap. She was silent for a long moment, as if gathering courage. Then finally she spoke. "In my culture," she began, her voice trembling, "food is not only survival. It is our language, our promise, our love. To cook for someone every day is to share your life. But there is one dish above all, a final, sacred meal. We prepare it only when we wish to bind ourselves to another for all time." Daniel felt his chest tighten. His eyes flickered to the vessel on the table, glowing softly like a heart beating in the dark. He swallowed hard. "Lyra, are you saying what I think you're saying?" Her glowing eyes softened, shimmering like liquid silver. "Yes," she whispered. "This is my proposal. If you eat this meal, you will accept me. Not just as a neighbor, not just as a friend, but as your partner, as your forever." Daniel's breath caught. For a moment, the room spun around him. He had not expected this. Not tonight. Not so suddenly. His heart ached with emotion he could barely contain. He looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who had filled his empty nights with warmth, who had healed pieces of him he thought would never be whole again. The woman who laughed at his stories, listened when no one else did, and gave him food that felt like love itself. And yet, doubt gnawed at him. He was human. She was not. Could he truly give her what she deserved? Could he accept a life so different from the one he had known? What if her people found her? What if she left one day? 1,000 fears rushed into his mind, drowning out the voice of his heart. Lyra noticed. She lowered her gaze, her voice soft and pained. "If you refuse, Daniel, I will understand. But know this. If you say no, I cannot cook for you again. It is forbidden to offer less after proposing. I would not dishonor you with half of my heart." Daniel's world seemed to crash down around him. The thought of never tasting her food again was painful. But the truth was clearer than that. It wasn't the food he couldn't live without. It was her. Her laughter. Her voice. Her presence. Still, fear chained his tongue. His hands trembled as he tried to form words, but nothing came. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Lyra finally stood, her face calm but her eyes shining with sorrow. She reached for the vessel, as though preparing to take it away. And at that moment, Daniel realized the truth. He could not let her go. Not now. Not ever. "Wait," he said, his voice breaking. She froze, looking at him with wide, shimmering eyes. Daniel stood and placed his hand over hers, stopping her from lifting the vessel. His chest ached, his throat tight with emotion, but his words came steady now. "I don't understand everything about your world, Lyra. I don't know what challenges we'll face. But I do know this. I don't want a life without you. Not anymore." Her lips parted, her eyes glowing brighter than ever, as tears shimmered against her cheeks. Slowly, she set the vessel back down, her hands trembling with hope. And in that quiet moment, between fear and love, Daniel's answer became clear. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. The image of the glowing silver vessel on his table haunted him. It was still there, sitting quietly, as if waiting for his choice. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts a storm. Lyra had asked him to accept a bond far greater than anything he had ever known. A bond not just of companionship, but of forever. She hadn't spoken in riddles. She meant it. Her proposal was not casual, not a game. It was sacred, but Daniel's fears twisted inside him. He was human. She was alien. Their worlds were galaxies apart. Could they truly walk the same path? What would people think if they knew? What kind of future could they build? He had always struggled to connect with people from his own world. How could he possibly keep up with someone from the stars? Yet, when he thought of refusing her, his chest ached so deeply he felt it might break. He remembered the long nights before Lyra came, the silence, the loneliness that had eaten away at him piece by piece. He remembered the way her meals warmed him, not just in his stomach, but in his heart. Every laugh they shared, every quiet moment together. Those weren't things he could let go of. But still, doubt whispered cruelly in his ear. What if she grew tired of him? What if her people came searching for her and took her away? What if his simple, ordinary human life was not enough for someone who carried starlight in her eyes? The next evening, Daniel sat with her again, but his heart was heavy. Lyra did not bring food this time. She sat quietly across from him, her glowing eyes studying his face, as if she could see the war inside him. "You are troubled," she said softly. Daniel sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I am. Lyra, I don't know if I can give you what you deserve. You're so different. And I'm just me." Her gaze softened, but she did not look away. Different does not mean distant. My people believe that love is the bridge between worlds. Do you not feel it, Daniel? The bond between us. Daniel's throat tightened. Of course he felt it. He felt it every moment he looked at her, every time she laughed, every time her hand brushed his. But fear still chained his words. "I do," he whispered. "But what if I fail you?" Lyra reached out, her hand warm against his trembling one. "Then we fail together. That is what it means to bind. You carry me, and I carry you." Her words pierced his heart. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy and fragile. Daniel could see the sincerity in her eyes, the way they glowed not just with light, but with hope. Still, he hesitated. Lyra lowered her gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. "If you cannot, Daniel, if you cannot accept me, I will leave. Not only your meals, but this place. For me, to offer my heart and have it refused it is shame I cannot bear." Daniel's breath caught. Leave? The thought sent a sharp pain through him, deeper than anything he had felt before. The apartment walls seemed to close in around him. The silence he had once endured now felt unbearable at the mere thought of its return. That night, after she left, Daniel sat alone in his apartment. The vessel still glowed softly on the table. He stared at it for hours, his hands trembling, his heart pounding. He thought of the first night she knocked on his door, the warmth of her food filling his cold apartment. He thought of her laughter, her voice, the way she looked at him as though he was more than he had ever believed himself to be. And then he understood. It wasn't the food that had healed him. It wasn't the strange colors or the shimmering flavors. It was her. It had always been her. Without her, his life would sink back into the silence he had barely survived. With her, he felt alive again, and even if the future was uncertain, even if fear whispered in his heart, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He couldn't let her go. Daniel closed his eyes, his decision finally clear. Tomorrow, he would give her his answer. Morning came, but Daniel hardly noticed the rising sun. He had not slept, not truly. His mind had been racing all night, and his heart had carried the weight of a decision bigger than anything he had faced before. Yet when he looked at the small glowing vessel still sitting on his table, he felt peace instead of fear. He knew what he had to do. That evening, he knocked on Lyra's door for the first time. Usually, it was always her who came to him, always her who reached out. This time, it was Daniel who carried the weight in his chest and the courage in his hands. The door opened, and there she stood. Lyra's silver-blue eyes flickered softly, though Daniel saw the sadness hiding there. She had been preparing herself for his refusal, he realized. She had been bracing for loss. Daniel's voice shook, but he forced the words out. "Can I come in?" She nodded silently and stepped aside. Inside, her apartment was quiet. No food simmered on the stove. No glowing dishes filled the air with warmth. It felt empty, like her hope had been dimmed. Daniel's chest tightened at the thought that he had caused this. He turned to her, his hands trembling, but his eyes steady now. "Lyra," he whispered, "last night I almost let fear win. I thought about how different we are, how impossible it might be. But then I thought about you, about everything you've done for me. And I realized, I don't want to live in a world without you." Her lips parted, her glowing eyes brightening with sudden light. But she didn't speak, afraid to break the fragile moment. Daniel took a deep breath. "I don't understand all of your traditions. I don't know what the future holds. But I know this. I want to walk it with you. If your food is your way of binding, then I accept it. I accept you." Lyra's hands trembled as she brought the silver vessel forward. For a moment, her tears shimmered like starlight on her cheeks. "Are you certain, Daniel? This bond is forever." Daniel smiled softly, though his eyes burned with his own unshed tears. "Forever sounds right." With hands that shook with both fear and joy, she opened the vessel. Inside was a dish unlike anything Daniel had seen before. It glowed softly, its colors shifting like a living sunrise, gold, pink, and deep silver blending together. The smell was sweet and warm, like comfort itself. "This," Lyra whispered, "is the sacred meal of my people. We call it Elerin. It means two become one. If you eat it, you are mine, and I am yours. Our lives bound, no matter where we walk." Daniel's chest ached with emotion, but he nodded. "Then let us be bound." Lyra's hands trembled as she lifted a small piece and held it to his lips. Daniel closed his eyes and tasted it. The flavor was overwhelming, sweet and sharp, soft and powerful all at once. It was more than taste. It was memory, warmth, and love flowing through him. He felt her presence in it, her laughter, her care, her hope. It was as if every meal she had ever made for him was gathered into this one bite, this one eternal promise. When he opened his eyes, Lyra was crying, but her smile was radiant, brighter than any light he had ever seen. "Then we are one," she whispered. Daniel reached out, taking her hand in his. "We always were," he said softly. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was peaceful, full of meaning. The loneliness that had once defined Daniel's life was gone, replaced by something greater than he had ever believed possible. For the first time in years, he felt whole, and as they sat together, hand in hand, Daniel understood the truth. It was not humanity or alien kind that defined them. It was not distance or difference or even fear. It was the choice to love, the courage to say yes, and the bond that food and hearts could create. Lyra leaned against him, her glowing eyes soft with joy. Daniel closed his eyes, holding her close. The future was uncertain, but it no longer scared him, because he would face it with her, forever.